Welcome to this explainer. Think of this as your ultimate survival guide to conquering the absolute toughest JavaScript and React interview questions out there. So if you've got a technical interview on the horizon, well, you are in exactly the right place. Let's dive in.
We know technical interviews can be seriously daunting. Honestly, they can feel like navigating a minefield of trick questions and really obscure syntax. But today, we're equipping you with the exact knowledge you need to ace them. We're going to treat your prep like a quest, breaking down the exact core concepts interviewers use to separate the novices from the absolute masters.
Okay, here is our map for today's quest. We'll start by conquering core JavaScript quirks. Then we'll level up with some modern features, move on to taming asynchronous JavaScript, and finally, we'll face the React boss.
All right, Level 1, Conquering Core JavaScript Quirks.
A classic trick right out of the gate is asking you to compare null and undefined. Now, they might seem super similar, but they tell two entirely different stories in your code. You just have to remember that null is an intentional primitive value representing absolutely nothing. It's the deliberate absence of any object value. On the flip side, undefined simply means, hey, a variable has been declared, but it currently lacks a value.
Oh, and you've got to watch out for this infamous little quirk. Checking the type of null inexplicably returns object. I know, right? Even though null is explicitly a primitive value representing the absence of an object, the type of operator just gets totally confused. It's a really well-known legacy bug in JavaScript, and it's one you absolutely must know to prove your depth of knowledge to an interviewer.
Interviewers are also going to heavily test your knowledge of scope. They love asking you to contrast var, let, and const. You need to clearly articulate that var is functionally scoped and gets hoisted to the top with a default value of undefined. Meanwhile, let and const give you strict block scope, which makes your code so much safer and way more predictable.
And you know, this strict scoping brings us to a crucial concept, the temporal dead zone. Interviewers ask about hoisting and the temporal dead zone to see if you actually understand memory management under the hood, not just basic syntax. If you try to access a let or const variable before its actual declaration line, you won't just get an undefined value like you would with var. Instead, the program outright throws a reference error. That time frame right before the declaration, that's your temporal dead zone.
Next up, we have closures. These are incredibly powerful, and they happen when a function basically remembers the environment in which it was created. This is a massive topic. Essentially, an inner function retains access to its outer function's variables, even after that outer function has returned. And this isn't just trivia. It is literally the secret to data privacy and factory functions in JavaScript. Being able to effortlessly explain closures proves you really understand execution context and scope chains.
Moving right along to Section 2, Leveling Up with Modern Features.
So let's venture into modern ES6 and newer features. Think of these upgrades as syntax shortcuts that show your interviewer you're totally up to date with modern development. Using the latest syntax just tells them that you care about writing clean, efficient, and highly readable code.
First up is the nullish coalescing operator. Yeah, those two question marks. This provides a brilliant, super safe way to set default values when you're dealing specifically with null or undefined. Unlike the logical OR operator, which triggers on literally any falsy value like a 0 or an empty string, nullish coalescing strictly targets null or undefined. It's a real game changer for preventing nasty UI bugs.
Next, using the hash symbol for private methods and fields shows you understand strict encapsulation within JavaScript classes. By just dropping a hash before a property name, you guarantee it can only be accessed from within that specific class. It keeps your internal logic totally safe from outside interference.
Finally, check out the native array group by method. This is an incredibly powerful new tool to easily organize collection data by specific criteria, all without needing to write complex custom logic or pull in massive external libraries. It perfectly shows you know how to manipulate data structures cleanly and natively.
All right, Section 3, Taming Asynchronous JavaScript. When discussing async behavior, you really need to explain the evolution of it. Start by explaining standard callbacks, and then describe how they can easily devolve into that dreaded, deeply nested callback hell, or the pyramid of doom. Then, explain how promises emerge to save the day as a much cleaner, structured solution to chain asynchronous events together without completely losing your mind. Now, when you're discussing promises, precision is key. You need to be prepared to explain that a promise represents the eventual completion, or failure, of an asynchronous operation, and it always exists in one of 4 specific states. It's pending while waiting, fulfilled on success, rejected on a failure, and settled when it's finally done, regardless of what the final outcome actually was. If you're going for a Node.js role, this next one is legendary. Knowing the exact event loop timing differences here shows a really deep understanding of asynchronous execution. You've got to explain that set timeout is based on a specified delay. Set immediate runs in the next iteration of the event loop. But process.nextTick, that one basically jumps the line. It executes immediately after the current operation, but before the event loop continues processing other I/O events.
We've reached the final stretch, Section 4, Facing the React Boss.
The React battleground is honestly vast, but these core concepts are the absolute must-know topics you will be tested on to prove your competency. If you can confidently navigate state, props, hooks, component lifecycles, and the virtual DOM, you are well on your way to a job offer. So let's look at the absolute biggest one.
The fundamental distinction you must articulate is the difference between state and props. State is internal and mutable, meaning it's managed right inside the component, and it can change over time. Props, on the other hand, are external and read-only. They are passed down from a parent component and simply cannot be modified by the receiving child, period. You also have to confidently explain the virtual DOM. Instead of interacting directly with the sluggish, real browser DOM for every single little change, React uses the virtual DOM. Think of it as a lightweight, in-memory representation of the UI. It uses this to calculate differences and optimize rendering performance behind the scenes, ensuring it only updates exactly what needs to be updated. So, as you continue your quest beyond this explainer, just remember that having the right tools and knowing the textbook definitions is really only part of the journey. The real difference between passing and failing an interview often comes down to your mindset and your repetition. As our source materials so wisely puts it, everyone learns uniquely. Some people prefer reading the docs, some build out side projects, and some watch explainers just like this one. But true mastery ultimately comes down to your steady preparation and consistency. You just have to keep reviewing these concepts until they become completely second nature.
You've got the map, you've equipped the essential concepts, you've navigated the trickiest pitfalls of JavaScript types, async event loops, and React component architecture. So the only question left is, will you let the code dictate your limits, or will you master these quirks to build the web of tomorrow? Get out there, ace that interview, and keep exploring.